We bring together you and Unique, and then connect you with our nephew. He just relocated to South Jamaica from a very lucrative stint in East New York. We could corner the market.
Now, what's the next move for Unique now that everybody can finally stop saying Unique is Breeze? We got our introduction, which in my opinion, I really liked. I thought it was a great way to introduce Breeze, nothing too over the top. Brief introduction to Kanan, brief introduction from Snaps and Pop in terms of how Breeze is a visionary, a scholar, and someone who also has a bright mind. So I am glad that we can finally put Unique being Breeze theories to bed. But that is also going to form part of this breakdown. We're going to be talking about the trio of Unique, Breeze, and Kanan. A new alliance that we might see in Season 5 thanks to Snaps and Pop. How would the alliance work? What would it look like? And where could it end up come the end of Season 5? That's going to be part 2 to this breakdown. Part 1, we're going to take a look at Unique's next move in terms of hitting Rock's organization, some interesting conversations he might have with Rock, and also Lou taking Panessa hostage. So that's the agenda for today's breakdown. With that being said, let's start with the war with Rock, where I do actually want to start with the Italians. Now I do think we have to start with the Italians because of their influence, where they sit on the chessboard, what was revealed in episode 10, and the huge betrayal from Phil Russo. Towards the end of 410, we saw Unique meeting Phil Russo, because he wanted the go-ahead to finally hit Rock and her organization in Queens. Earlier on in Season 4, when Unique managed to get the backing of Phil Russo, he refused to give him the permission to take the attack to Queens, because it would have caused a direct conflict with Stefano. At the time, we thought it was because there was a lot of tension between the two Italian mob bosses. Little did we know, these Italians have been playing the Thomases and Unique the entire time. What a surprise, who would have thought you could never trust the Italians? It was revealed that Phil Russo was actually the one who called the hit on Sal Baselli to take his position, and when Stefano threatened to make that public within his organization, Phil Russo took a stab at Stefano, but missed. That was an important takeaway from episode 10. Stefano isn't dead, so that's something we do have to remember when it comes to the grand scheme of things in terms of this war. That's also why he did kind of look defeated towards the end. He knows he's fucked up. If you're going to take a stab at one of the Italian crime bosses, don't miss. And that's why he gave Unique permission to go on the offensive, because it is about to be no holds barred anyway. When Stefano eventually returns, if he returns, I personally do think he will, because I don't think he's dead and he's also going to want revenge. So it is going to start to get really messy between the Italians from Stefano's end and also Phil Russo's end. Phil Russo just looks like a guy who knows time is ticking. He knows he's got nothing more to lose, which is why he gave Unique the go-ahead to attack Queens. However, at this moment in time, Stefano has already cut off the Thomases. He wanted nothing to do with them, but maybe that may change come Season 5 because of Phil Russo's betrayal. If Stefano wants to take a shot at Phil Russo and the Italians out in New Jersey, maybe he will reconsider his relationship with the Thomases, because in his words, they love to use these little guys for their proxy wars. He also does have a bit of a thing for Rock if any of you guys have noticed. The way he's spoken about Rock definitely has a thing for her for sure. However, as I just mentioned before, with these Italians, there are big trust issues here. Marvin even mentioned to Rock not too long ago, they needed to make a move on Stefano themselves. We've all seen Stefano trying to play between Marvin and Rock, we saw him do it with both. So, if they are to get back into bed with the Italians, they do need to be very careful. Definitely something to keep in mind in the grand scheme of things when it comes to this war between New York and New Jersey. The Italians definitely will have a part to play. Now with Unique, we saw him attacking Rock's organization. Thanks to E-Tone, he put the final nail in the coffin for Rock's transportation. He then started to light up the Chinese restaurants, which I do think were useless anyway. Erwin already told Rock their business partnership was done, but Unique wasn't to know and it still hurts Rock. She's got all this product come through from Hafiz and the Afghans. She made big promises to Hafiz earlier on in the season, where he did warn, the bloodiest wars were fought over territory. That was a foreshadow for what was eventually coming Rock's way towards the end of Season 4. But now that she's got all this product from Hafiz and the Afghans, but no infrastructure to move the product, no transportation, her business is a complete mess, and they're also facing a lot of gunfire from every single direction. We saw Marvin coming under heavy gunfire towards the end of episode 10, and Unique and Akbar's guys from Trenton, they were still out in Queens. They wanted a hell of a lot of smoke. Who knows whether they took it to Rock's house or where they went after hitting Marvin. We'll only get that answer come episode 501. However, Rock did also make her move, which I do think will calm the situation down in the short term. She had Lou watching Panessa's mother, which eventually led him straight to Panessa and Jerome. He then grabbed both, and now they have Unique's biggest weaknesses held hostage, so that is something they can use to defuse the situation in the short term at the beginning of Season 5. Rock mentioned if Unique's targeting Kanan, then family is fair game. Although I would hope that Rock and Lou don't do anything to Panessa and Jerome, because they've just been caught up in this war between Unique and Rock, which actually started with Unique getting the wrong end of the stick. Let's remember, all of this started because of Ronnie back in season 3, that's number 1. And number 2, Unique not being right in his mind. He still believes that Rock had something to do with taking him out with Ronnie back in 305. Whether he ever comes around to believing that she didn't, I mean, who knows. I do think there will be a couple of conversations between Unique and Rock in season 5, especially when she reveals that she's got Panessa and Jerome. That definitely will diffuse the situation in the short term, but there's also the small matter of Rock's pregnancy and abortion. Let's not forget, Unique was the one who got Rock pregnant, and I do think that may be something that still comes out in conversation in season 5. I do think Patina Miller may have hinted at it in one of her interviews, so it might just be worth keeping this in the back of our minds heading into season 5. But overall, in terms of this war with Unique, I do think because Lou and Rock have Panessa and Jerome, they do kind of have the upper hand. No matter how much noise Unique is making in Queens, once Unique finds out that Rock has Panessa and Jerome, Unique definitely will have to stand down. But the beef definitely won't end there between Unique and Rock, that's for sure. A lot of bodies will fall, a lot of chess games will be played, mind games, and there's also going to be people looking at the situation thinking they can definitely profit from this. Chaos creates opportunity. And well, that brings me on to how Snaps and Pop are probably seeing it exactly that way. An opportunity to bring 2 or 3 characters together in an unlikely alliance. Unique, Kanan, and Breeze. Now during this conversation, Snaps did mention teaming up with Unique. He said it's the ideal arrangement. They have their own connect and transportation. I'm not exactly sure who they're referring to when they say they have their own connect, but I have no doubt they've got their connection somewhere. We know these guys are very experienced in the game. They have a lot of resources, connections, and alliances. They're pretty well patterned when it comes to every single part of the game. That's why they're in the position they're in. But Snaps mentioned if they put him with Unique, as well as introducing him to his nephew, together they can corner the market. Now what's Snaps and Pops' game? They wanted a bigger piece of the pie. The cash that they have rolling in from Kanan at this moment is definitely good, but just imagine if he was able to team up with Unique, with the soldiers that he has from Trenton. Just imagine if they were to bring in their nephew Breeze. Imagine how much damage they could cause together, how much money they could make, how big their empire could actually be. And well, if you're putting Kanan, Breeze, and Unique together, it's just going to end up filling Snaps and Pops' pocket even further. That is something I do think we should be looking forward to come season 5, a potential alliance between Unique, Kanan, and Breeze. We've already seen Unique and Kanan meet back in 409, where Unique was really impressed with Kanan. He stood his ground when he came to talk to him about Crystal, but also stood his ground and didn't hesitate to tell Unique he was the one who checked Ronnie, and he'd do it again. Ironically, if you go back to 305, Ronnie mentioned to Unique nobody checks him. Well, Kanan did, checkmate Kanan in 310.
Nobody checked me, Meek. Nigga needed to be checked, so I checked him. And I'll do it again.
Now Unique really liked the way Kanan's grown. He sees the potential in him, he knows that he can make a lot of money, and he also knows that if he brings him on board, it would also mess with Rock. And I do think there will be an alliance with Unique. Snaps and Pop have the connect, they have the transportation, Unique's got the soldiers, and now they can expand through Kanan and Breeze. It's a win-win situation for every party involved. However, what have we learned when it comes to the world of power? There will always be some sort of betrayal and backstabbing. These two guys are very young, ambitious, pretty raw, which is why Snaps and Pop were mentoring Kanan in season 4. They saw the potential in Kanan, so they wanted to make sure that he was on the right path, help him correct his wrongs. But they are still very young, raw, full of emotion, just like we saw in episode 10. They're going to be hungry to get to the top of the food chain. And how do you get to the top of the food chain when someone's already sitting in that seat? You guys definitely know the answer. We've seen and heard countless of stories in Power. You have to take out the boss. Just like Kanan said back in season 2 of Power, why wouldn't Roller want to take out the boss? It's the same shit you did to Breeze. Same thing if anyone's in the way of your future. And eventually I do see a scenario where Kanan and Breeze could make a play on Unique. Both Breeze and Kanan will definitely be getting some big scalps. And I do think there's only one way it ends for Unique. In my Marvin character breakdown earlier this week, in the comment section I posed the question, do you think Marvin's story arc ends with death or jail? I do still think Marvin has to die to really unleash Duke, but for this one, I'm not going to ask the question, because I do think Unique's story arc will end with Unique's death. Because if you think about who Unique is as a character, ask yourselves, what has he always wanted from day one? He's wanted to be the king of the kingdom, he's wanted to rule Queens. However, we know at some point Kanan and Breeze will be the ones who take over Queens for themselves. We do know at least that part of the story where eventually Breeze becomes that guy. And if Breeze is eventually the top dog, alongside Kanan, and a young Ghost and Tommy underneath them, you have to ask the question, where's Unique? Where's Snaps and Pop? Especially with their betrayal around Fame and Crystal. If Kanan and Breeze do work with Unique in Season 5, for as long as Unique's around, they'll always be second and third in command, and we know that's not going to last long as we transition into Power Origins. So, I do eventually see a scenario where one of Kanan or Breeze get a big scalp in Season 5, Unique. I mean, we've already seen Kanan getting a big scalp in Ronnie Mathis. What if he was to take out Unique, both brothers? For Breeze and Kanan to really grow in the game and take that next step up, Unique's gonna have to go. Now, having said that, we've all seen Season 4 in its entirety, and what a chess game it was, especially from Snaps and Pop. Well, Season 5 will definitely be no different, except it is going to have a lot more blood and a lot more death. So if we are talking big scalps such as Snaps, Pop and the likes of Unique, you can guarantee there's going to be a lot of manipulation, twisting of the truth, people stabbing each other in the back, making certain plays that benefit themselves. The crazy thing is, we don't even know what Breeze is capable of yet either. We've just got a very brief introduction to him. So again, what role will he play when it comes to taking queens? Let's remember, he is a nephew of Snaps and Pop, and we are definitely all well aware of who they are after Season 4. But come the end of Season 5, I do expect Breeze and Kanan to have cleared the chessboard, where they end up being the ones in control. A lot of big players will fall, and even if they do build this alliance with Unique through Snaps and Pop, I do feel like it will be short-lived. But with that being said, that's a breakdown of where we are with Unique. There's the war with Rock, and how the Italians will still be in the picture through Phil Russo and Stefano. However, what I'm really looking forward to seeing is how this potential alliance starts to unfold between Unique, Breeze and Kanan. If they do take that route in Season 5, which I do think they will, it's going to be really interesting to see them team up, learn from Unique, but it's also going to be an alliance which is going to be full of betrayal and backstabbing in the end, that's for sure. And I do think come the end of Season 5, Kanan will get another big scalp, or maybe even Breeze. Maybe Breeze is the one who takes out Unique. Maybe it's both of them. Let's wait and see. With that being said, drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.